Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Sitting in for Pinky Webb, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Today on the program, the Philippines accused the Chinese Coast Guard of blocking and aiming laser beams at a Philippine resupply ship near Ayungin Shoal. Beijing claims it was the Philippine Coast Guard who intruded into Chinese waters. Maritime affairs expert Jay Batongbacal joins us in the show. And the incident draws the ire of Philippine lawmakers. Gabriela Partylist Representative Arlene Brosas tells us more. China is once again coming under fire for what appears to be yet another provocation in the West Philippine Sea. A Chinese Coast Guard ship is being accused of flashing its military-grade laser at a Philippine Coast Guard vessel in Ayungin Shoal, temporarily blinding some Filipino crew. National Security Advisor Eduardo Año has directed the PCG to enforce maritime law in the West Philippine Sea with due diligence. Meanwhile, several lawmakers have called on Malacanang to meet with other claimant countries. Details from our senior correspondent, David Santos.
This video, taken on board BRP Malapascua last February 6th, shows a Chinese ship blocking its way. The Philippine vessel was near Ayungin Shoal in the West Philippine Sea.
This China Coast Guard vessel 5205 conducted a lot of dangerous maneuver as near as 150 yards, and then at the same time use military-grade laser targeting our crew on board the vessel, particularly on the bridge of the vessel, that caused temporary blindness to our sailors.
The Philippine Coast Guard vessel was assisting the resupply mission for Filipino troops stationed in the Philippine Navy's grounded transport ship, BRP Sierra Madre.
10 to 15 seconds of temporary blindness would really affect your operational capability, especially so if you're the one who's steering the Coast Guard vessel.
The PCG is criticizing China's latest aggressive action, calling it a blatant disregard and clear violation of Philippine sovereign rights. Apparently, this is not the first time China flashed a laser beam on a Philippine vessel. A PCG tugboat was also allegedly shadowed and harassed by a Chinese vessel in June last year.
They were hit by blue-colored lights for almost 20 minutes. It also resulted to temporary blindness and even skin irritation to our crew.
China has been previously accused of resorting to the use of lasers against its perceived adversaries. In 2018, the U.S. military monitored at least 20 incidents where China allegedly targeted American aircraft with lasers over the Pacific.
The Secretary of National Defense has already declared or said that the act committed by the Coast Guard of China is offensive and unsafe. Therefore, I think it is time for the Chinese government to restrain its forces so that it does not commit any provocative act that will endanger the lives of people.
The PCG says China's aggressive actions continue to persist in the West Philippine Sea. Even Chinese militia boats, accordingly, are actively taking part in harassing and blocking Filipino vessels upon the behest of the China Coast Guard. This photo, taken in August last year, shows a Chinese Coast Guard crew removing the cover of the ship's naval gun, which was directed to the PCG's BRP Teresa Magbanwa.
That kind of action is provocative. There's no reason for them to remove the cover of their 70mm naval armament and to point it to Teresa Magbanwa. Our another role is to document this and then to prepare this as an evidence for us to file diplomatic protest against China.
The PCG says their personnel flashed with Chinese lasers have been brought to Palawan to undergo physical check on any potential medical injury that the incident may have caused them. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
Meanwhile, China is accusing the Philippine Coast Guard of intruding in what it claims are its waters. Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Wang Wenbin says the PCG vessel entered the waters near Ayungin Shoal, which China calls Renai Reef, without permission. However, a maritime expert points out Ayungin Shoal is not a valid subject to China's claim of sovereignty. Let's go straight to the source of the story, maritime affairs expert, Professor Jay Batongbacal. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Mai, and to all our viewers, good morning.
Professor, your reaction to China's claim that it was the Philippine Coast Guard who intruded in its waters, prompting them to retaliate. I mean, this is Ayungin Shoal we are talking about, and China is claiming that it's part of Nansha Islands. Did China go too far in asserting its excessive maritime claims?
Yes, I believe so, because really Ayungin Shoal is a submerged feature. It is part of the Philippines' EEZ and continental shelf. It cannot be subject to claims of appropriation that would create territorial or sovereignty claims over any feature. The South China Sea arbitration clearly ruled that Second Thomas Shoal or Ayungin Shoal is not subject to any kind of appropriation by China.
So you're talking about the arbitral ruling, right? And China said
Yes.
the Coast
Yes.
Guard needed to ask permission in entering that territory. But has this always been the case? Did Philippine vessels ask for permission to enter these waters before?
No, definitely not. That is a wild and fantastic claim. No, the Philippines does not require Chinese permission to use any part of its EEZ and continental shelf. And as I said, this reef, Second Thomas Shoal or Ayungin Shoal, being part of the EEZ and continental shelf, it cannot be subject to claims of sovereignty. There is no need to ask for permission from anyone, for the Philippines to be able to do whatever it wants within this area.
Okay, let's talk about the use of military-grade laser lights. Are these beams enough to imply an act of aggression? What is the UN protocol on this?
Well, for me, it is already a threat of the use of force because it is accompanied by, or it follows the dangerous maneuverings that was mentioned by Commodore Tariela earlier. And it is also after the radio warnings that they issue in a standard manner to in all of these encounters, which is to warn the approaching vessel of consequences, unspecified consequences if they do not comply with the China Coast Guard's demands. So considering that the vessel which was subjected to this laser lights was a government vessel, this is no longer a mere attempt to enforce maritime law. This is already an act by one state against another state, through their respective government vessels. So it is already a threat of the use of force, which is contrary to the provisions of the United Nations Charter.
Well, these are considered non-lethal weapons. For what purpose have these been developed in the first place?
Well, lasers are of different types. The so-called non-lethal ones are sometimes referred to as dazzlers. They're meant to blind the operators of vessels or other vehicles, both whether temporarily or possibly even permanently, to prevent them from operating their vehicles. The thing is, lasers can also be used to target weapons like missiles, and the newer ones, the high-intensity lasers, can actually burn through vehicles and other objects. So this is a matter of concern, especially when it was mentioned during the report that a blue laser was possibly used against some of our people. The blue lasers are more energy intensive than the green ones. So if a green laser can dazzle, a blue laser can actually burn, depending on the power of the device. So the report that there was skin irritation is an indication that this laser that was used is more powerful than the one that is now being featured or being shown in the video.
So it hasn't been determined yet what kind of laser was used?
Yes, but definitely the green one is most likely one of those dazzlers. This kind of laser has been developed also by other countries and used to fight against pirates, no? Especially in piracy-prone areas like the Gulf of Aden near Somalia. So this is probably the same kind of laser that they used against the Coast Guard.
Well, China is also claiming it acted in a professional and restrained manner. But did the incident merit the use of military-grade laser? And can this be considered a restrained response?
I think it is not a professional or restrained manner, because if they were true to their word that they wanted maritime cooperation and peace and consultations, they wouldn't need to use these devices against another government vessel. They could have just communicated peacefully, no? But instead, they basically are coercing our forces. They are exercising or using threats of the use of force to prevent our vessels from even approaching Second Thomas Shoal. Now, this runs directly against everything they've said about trying to solve our disputes amicably, creating an atmosphere of peace and stability. This kind of action goes against that.
Well, the Philippine Coast Guard said the laser light caused temporary blindness among the Filipino crew and disrupted the resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. Now, is China legally liable for this, and what is the penalty? Because this is not the first time that China used military-grade laser on other foreign ships. There was an incident in 2002 that they used it on an Australian aircraft, and in 2018 on U.S. pilots.
Yes, I believe they can be made liable because under UNCLOS, even if a state is undertaking legitimate maritime law enforcement activities out at sea, it is not supposed to do so in a manner which creates a danger to navigation, and causes the possibility and creates a possibility of an incident that would create harm or injury to the vessel as much as possible, or even danger to the marine environment. So it's supposed to restrain itself from such actions and make sure that any such actions are really the last resort already. In this instance, as we see, the vessels are some distance away, and there was really no necessity of using these types of methods. The Coast Guards of the two countries even have a hotline of their own, supposedly, which was announced back in 2017. So there is absolutely no justification for this kind of threatening moves, in light of all these circumstances.
Professor, would you know what was the action taken by the U.S. and Australia following these incidents?
I'm sorry, I missed that because of some interference.
Yes, would you know the action taken by the U.S. and Australia following those incidents?
Okay. So far, what has been announced is that the appropriate protests were made and communications were made to the Chinese government about these incidents and about the possibility that there would be responses in the future. So the content of those communications, of course, we do not know. But I'm sure that the U.S. and Australia gave them a piece of their mind about repeating these types of incidents.
Okay, how is this latest Ayungin Shoal incident any different from previous ones involving the Chinese Coast Guard and our own?
Well, I think that this shows that Chinese activities against the Philippines are really escalating very slowly. Because before, it used to be just verbal warnings. Then it stepped up to dangerous maneuvers. Then it stepped up again to showing weapons, just displaying weapons. And then last year, they were actually even pointing some of these weapons already, And now we have a laser which actually produces effects on the subject vessel. And the laser, as I said, it can be for dazzling, but it can also be for targeting. So I think we're seeing a slow and steady escalation of Chinese activities, all of it intended to blockade, basically, Ayungin Shoal and prevent us from resupplying our troops there. So I think that this is all heading in the direction of China eventually taking Ayungin Shoal away by preventing us from maintaining our outpost there.
So, Professor, what action can the government take that can elicit a positive, immediate, and concrete response? Well, the president has said that we are to be friendly to all countries, but until what point should the president tolerate these actions from China?
I think we have to demand that friendship, friendship in words be matched by friendship in deeds. So we should demand that China stop all of these activities and withdraw its forces from the area around Ayungin Shoal and the Kalayaan Island group. Because if they are true to their word, if they were really sincere in seeking a negotiated settlement, no, and finding ways to cooperate, they wouldn't be doing these kinds of coercive and threatening activities against us while they say that they're trying to negotiate. Second, we should also make it a policy to always reveal, no, to always disclose these types of incidents to the whole world, no, to show everyone what China is doing and how its activities do not match its statements and its words, so that they will somehow also be aware that these types of activities will not be acceptable in any kind of civilized international community. And third, we should, of course, talk with our allies and friends, no, about and exchange information and knowledge about how to deal with these types of incidents, so that in the future we will be better prepared. And if necessary, we can also respond properly if they continue these kinds of escalatory activities.
Thank you for your time this morning, Maritime Affairs expert Jay Batongbacal. We will be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Our source today, Gabriela Partylist Representative Arlene Brosas. Good morning, Representative Brosas.
Yes, good morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.
Representative Brosas, ito po another provocation from China. This incident pointing military-grade laser at our Coast Guard is drawing condemnation. Ang sabi pa nga ng isang senador, kahit anong diplomatic protest, hindi naman pinakikinggan ng China. So, what do you think, ano ang dapat gawin ng ating gobyerno ngayon?
Yes, oo, nabalitaan nga natin yan, yung pagtutok ng laser. In fact, we are one of the parang nagko-complain kaugnay dito sa pagtutok ng laser. Alam naman natin na dapat kahit pa may mga phone-ops na nangyayari, pinapaalam yon sa both parties. So hindi dapat nangyayari na parang merong aggression na ginagawa ang China sa kasalukuyan sa ating sea, no, sa ating
territory.
EEZ. In fact, dapat po irespeto nila na yung kung talagang hindi sila nagkakaroon ng aggression dito, hindi magkakaroon ng mga insidente na katulad nito. It is a kind of aggression, yung tutukan ka ng laser. When we fully know kung ano ang effect nito, lalong-lalo na kung government vessel ang tinutukan. Actually, hindi na nga ito katanggap-tanggap kung sa nangyari ito sa mga fishing vessels natin, for example. Lalo pa kung government vessel. So, talagang kailangan po makipag-coordinate. Hindi siya pwedeng isang tabi or sabihin lang na magkaroon lang ng diplomasya at pag-usapan. Hindi lang po gano'n, talagang dapat i-complain ito sa UN ng government of the Philippines and mag-seek talaga ng pag-uusap kaugnay dito.
Well, I was talking to Professor Jay Batongbacal earlier and he said he sees an escalation of Chinese actions after this Ayungin Shoal incident. So now, how do you think the Marcos administration should act, and are you satisfied so far with how the government is taking this incident?
Actually, first of all, hindi tayo satisfied doon sa concern. Nangyari ito kamakailan pero hindi pa rin nagkakaroon ng action Marcos Jr. administration. Supposedly, dapat nagbigay na sila ng guidance and supposedly, dapat nakausap na ang mga concerned people. At pinag-uusapan natin ito na kailangan po merong urgency na sa part of the government para ito ay i-address. So, first, talagang hindi tayo satisfied sa nangyayari ngayon. Second, yung escalation ng aggression, of course, both, sa totoo lang po, when the President is in Japan right now and talking about the Visiting Forces Agreement, and we have the EDCA, we have the issues of the EDCA sites here, more EDCA sites here in the Philippines, tapos may aggression of China. So, parang parang yung nangyayari ay lalo talaga nagkakaroon ng escalation of aggression, hindi lang po sa part of the Chinese government, kundi pati din sa part ng iba't ibang gobyerno na gustong makialam dito sa ating bansa. Ang gusto lang natin sabihin dito, we have our own supposedly independent policy, di ba? When it comes to foreign relations. So kung gusto natin i-maintain 'yon, we should really do something about this, yung mga aggressions na ginagawa ng iba't ibang mga partidos or iba't ibang mga states sa ating mismong bansa.
Representative Brosas, I'd like to get your thoughts on what ACT Teachers Partylist Representative Franz Castro said. Ang sabi po niya, more than the VFA, we should pursue joint Coast Guard patrols with ASEAN member states, which would be a better deterrent against China.
Actually, tayo naman naniniwala sa iba't ibang forms ng pakikipag-usap and relations na won't encroach in our independence, yung kikilalanin yung ating territorial integrity. If it would mean na it will give us more freedom, parang ganyan, na hindi nag-encroach sa ating independence, okay lang yon. Pero kung kapareho din na magkakaroon lang lalo ng escalation of aggression because of that, hindi natin yun gusto, kung doon sa mga iba't ibang forms or fortifying, for example, the ASEAN relations, siguro doon sa point ng may mga bansa kasi dito sa ASEAN na ganun din yung ginagawa sa kanila ng China. So perhaps if we are together, and we actually parang ano yan parang united front ninyo na kayo ay nagkakaisa na hindi dapat ginagawa ang mga following aggressions ng Chinese dito sa ating bansa at sa iba pang mga bansa ng ASEAN, okay po 'yon. But if it will mas lalo magkakaroon ng aggression at papapasukin din natin ang US dito sa ating bansa, then we will also be a target. At hindi po mag-stop yung ganong mga aggressions. It will only get worse.
Okay. We have 3 minutes left, Representative Brosas, so I'd like to shift to another topic. Yesterday, the Makabayan Bloc filed the first petition against the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund. And you asked the Supreme Court to nullify both President Marcos's certification of the bill as urgent and the swift passage at the House of Representatives. Can you explain the petition you filed and what are the grounds, ma'am?
Yes, it is actually a procedural question sa Supreme Court. We are seeking guidance. For example, yung unang-una po namin doon na siguro inilagay yung mention, walang mention ng calamity or urgency ng pagpapasa nitong Maharlika Investment Fund. Kaya po sinasabi natin na yung certification, it should be voided kasi wala namang pag-mention ni hindi nga sinabi doon sa certification kung what is the real reason, bakit ka magpapasa ngayon ng ganyang batas ng Maharlika Investment Fund, hindi naman tayo under calamity, hindi naman tayo emergency. Parang ano po siya parang for the history, for past history ng mga administrations na ginagamit yung certification urgency, no? Urgent certification, parang sobrang abuso na ito, no? Kaya gusto sana natin, yun yung challenge natin, ano? Kasi sinertify po yan noong December 15 ni Pangulong BBM, pero kahit po sa Senate, wala din namang certification na gano'n na binigay. So parang na-short circuit po yung House of Representatives dyan. So yan po yung mga question natin, yan po yung mga challenge natin. And in fact, citing the Constitution, yun pong Article 6, Section 26, yan po yung ginamit natin doon sa usapin ng procedural question.
Right.
So yun po yung gusto nating sabihin lang, na huwag abusuhin yung certification of yung certification ng urgency.
Okay. Very
ng
quickly,
Pangulo.
ma'am, my final question. On the same day that you filed the petition, the Presidential Communications Office said it expects Congress to approve the Maharlika bill by June 2. Your thoughts?
Yan po, syempre 'di ba, talagang ano sila, no? Talagang parang very positive sila sa ganyang ano. But you know, the people should know na may karapatan pa rin tayo, no, kahit yung mga ordinaryong mamamayan na kumuha ng reprieve na hindi maipasa ang isang batas na hindi talaga sang-ayon o hindi talaga palatable or hindi talaga acceptable for us, no? Kaya kailangan po talaga malaman ng mga tao na hindi dapat minamadali yung mga ganitong klase ng batas, lalo na kung mag-i-implicate ito sa kalagayan nila sa kasalukuyan. We have so many things at the front lines ngayon, 'di ba? Marami tayong kinakaharap na problema. Ang tindi ng ating inflation, joblessness, may mga problema tayo sa overseas. Ang dami-dami nating kinakaharap na problema. Ni po yung yung mga agricultural na produkto na lalong tumitindi yung presyo, 'di ba? So hanggang ngayon ang mga utilidad nagtataasan. Ganyan po yung mga problema natin at hindi po 'yon nasusolusyonan ngayon.
Alright.
Kaya kailangan po timbangin yung usapin na yan. At yung Maharlika Investment Fund, we stand by our position na hindi po ito dapat inuuna ng pamahalaan sa kasalukuyan. When in other countries, yung mga sovereign wealth fund po na ay bumabagsak din, 'di ba? They are failing. So kailangan po natin tingnan ng mabuti kung tama ba na ito ang direksyon ng ating pamahalaan sa kasalukuyan na magpasa ng isang batas na prone for corruption, magpasa ng isang batas na kine-question ng ating mga mamamayan na gagamit ng pondo ng bayan. Okay. So yan ba ang kailangan natin? Hindi po yan ang kailangan natin ngayon.
Maraming salamat po, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Gabriela Partylist Representative Arlene Brosas. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Mai Rodriguez. You're watching CNN Philippines.